Hello everyone. As Andrew said, my name is Shoshana Whybrow and I am the VP of actually planning, strategy and colleague communications. They just keep adding things to my job title. And I'm here to talk to you about Sage and our award-winning Kickoff programme. So we really used a multi-channeled approach, as Andrew said, and we really wanted to connect with our colleagues and build that strategy as well as colleague engagement. So this is who we are. This is some of my fabulous team smiling back at you. Sage was born just over 40 years ago in a pub in Newcastle here in the UK. It was the brainchild of a local entrepreneur who sparked a digital accounting revolution. That's the spiel that we give in corporate affairs. But it's grown. There's now 11,000 colleagues all over the world, and we support millions of small and medium-sized businesses with finance, HR, and payroll solutions. We're the only technology company still listed on the FTSE 100, and we are growing rapidly year on year. So, let me introduce you to a few of those 11,000 colleagues.
Hello from Newcastle.
Hello from Newcastle.
Hello Johannesburg.
Bonjour.
Howdy y'all.
Hello.
Hello, Frankfurt.
Hello from Romania.
Hello from
Hello from Australia.
Hello from Sage.
Bonjour. Bonjour.
Bonjour depuis Paris.
Now that goes on for quite a while, so I will stop it there. But that was the start of our FY24 Kickoff campaign and how we launched it to our colleagues around the world. So, what is Sage Kickoffs? Kickoffs is how we start our new financial year. It's how we introduce our strategy and our business priorities for the year ahead. And it's a key date for my team. Partly because it's a build-up and the culmination of an awful lot of work. It comes right at the start of October, and it means a summer of planning, slightly sleepless nights, and coercing many people to come on board and help us out, because we are a pretty small, lean machine to make what you're going to see come to life. So I'll give you a bit of history. When I joined Sage 3 years ago, it came off the back of just tailing off COVID, and kickoffs had still happened throughout COVID, but it had been a very much digital experience. Prior to that, it had been a 3-hour long experience for colleagues twice. So our poor leaders had to do a live broadcast in the morning to cover an Asian market, a European market, and a kind of UK market. And then in the afternoon, they had to repeat themselves and do it all over again to an American market. I don't often feel sorry for our executive team, but that seemed to me like a pretty exhausting experience and fraught with the possibility of failure, let alone the fact asking colleagues to sit through 3 hours of solid, pretty dry content. So I thought it had to change. My first year, we delicately slipped into reducing it to an hour-long programme, only producing it once. But I thought we could go even further. So we started talking to colleagues. We surveyed them. Traditional stuff, went out, asked them what they wanted. We held listening circles. We looked at the data from what they were looking at, what they weren't looking at. And some things were fundamentally clear. The top-line messages did resonate. We were cutting through at a high level, but colleagues really weren't certain at what it meant for them, and they weren't engaging with all the content that was produced. All these insights told us that we needed to look further, look at what colleagues were doing in their outside lives, how they were consuming content, and then make sure we were hitting the mark. We also took a really deep dive at who our colleagues are. And if you're doing any sort of campaign or project, I really suggest digging into this type of data. So what you can see from this, and this evolves all the time, this is actually the data we did use in 2024 to kind of give you that snapshot. A third of our colleagues English isn't their native language. Most of them will speak English, but possibly not great. They might be in France talking to French customers. It's not a prerequisite of their role. A lot of them are remote or on the phones to our customers. So stepping away to consume a whole heap of content at once just isn't possible. They just can't do it. And then I always find this one interesting. More than half of our total colleague population is millennials or Gen Z. Now, this group of colleagues consume content very differently in their personal lives. They're not used to sitting and being made to watch a TV programme anymore that's just on TV. They choose, they pick, they think what's best for them. They listen to podcasts. They engage with different types of content to suit their lifestyle, yet we were still planning to broadcast at them in a straightforward way. Why the hell would they engage? So we looked at this data, and all of this told us that we needed a different strategy. We needed to meet colleagues where they are. So we proposed a shift in approach. And it's worth saying at this stage, I had to convince a few people this was a good idea. Sage is quite a traditional organisation, despite the fact it's a tech company. They're very British, with a bunch of Americans, and do things in a very straightforward way. So I had to take our ET and our ELT through this, why this was a good idea. So what we proposed was moving from a traditional conference-style event into a month-long content programme, where colleagues could pick and choose a bit more about what worked for them. A lot of it would be the same content, but in different mediums, so that they would hit the right mark. We'd stop doing just a top-down broadcast, and we'd look to have all-level representation. And you saw that at the start of the video. That was the very start of our kickoffs. It set the tone of colleagues being front and centre from all over the world. We wanted our colleagues to be active participants and to actively engage. So rather than just passively receiving or possibly receiving some of the information we were broadcasting at them, we wanted to see the active participation. So we needed to make it a bit fun, because if not, why were they going to bother? We set ourselves some really, really clear objectives. And this is something I would encourage you all to do at the start of any project or campaign. We do it for most things. We follow what's called the OASIS model, that some of you might be aware of. So we always set our objective. It grounds you. It also gives you the thing to keep going back to the business when they come up with a new idea, to say, no, it's not in our objectives. It doesn't align with what we're trying to achieve. And these were the ones we set out with. We also set ourselves a KPI, which I know in internal comms is really hard sometimes. You're often dealing with slightly dodgy measurement. But we set ourselves something, and we looked at ways how we could make sure we could capture and get that data. So, what did it look like? So, we reduced our day one global kickoff from an hour, and that original 3 hours, to just 30 minutes. Okay, and we responded to that insight that colleagues told us. That was the length of time they thought most people could step away from their desks to consume. We played it out as live, but we also had it on catch-up available and translated it into 5 different languages with closed captions, and had English captions on for those colleagues who were perhaps hard of hearing. It was very traditional in its nature. Traditionally, the CEO would stand on a stage, broadcast to a camera. We transformed that into a kind of human, punchier film, starting with our colleagues, but also featuring our customers and 3 different leaders. So we flew around the world to capture different bits of content. What actually happened was we created a brief, and then we got local teams to support us in filming things, and then we spliced it all together. And I was adamant it wasn't longer than 30 minutes. I think it came in at 29 and 35 seconds, and I was very pleased with that as a result. We then gave colleagues a half-hour break, and then we came back and did a live Q&A with 4 of our leaders on the stage with me asking the questions. I also had, this was quite cool, so in Cobalt, which is our Newcastle HQ, we've got a big atrium, and we've got so lots of colleagues out in the atrium. And then we've got balconies. So they were all on the balconies around looking down into the atrium. We broadcast it live via Teams, so not particularly complicated. And I had a big screen behind me with colleagues' faces from all over the world who were dialed into the Teams call. Very cool. I had a Brittany mic. And we took questions live, both from the audience in front of us, but also from the team behind us on the screen. Now, we'd selected the colleagues in advance, but we hadn't told the execs on the stage what the questions were. I'm really strict on this. If you want authenticity and for your colleagues to believe what they're hearing and believe the transparency, frankly, your execs are being paid enough to answer questions they don't know about beforehand. And we give them the rough themes we think might come up, but they can answer those questions straight. And it breeds a level of transparency and authenticity that is really appreciated by colleagues. So that was the big punchy bit. Then we started the kind of extended 4 weeks of content. So our exec team did mini tours. They went to 20 countries over that 4 week, split around, doing round tables, chatted to people in the lunch line, meeting customers, engaging with as many people as possible. We launched something called Connect, which was a new initiative where colleagues could sign up to meet with one of our top 75 leaders. Now, we call this our executive team. So basically, they could sign up, meet with them, have a one-to-one, have a remote call, have a coffee, and ask them anything they wanted. Actually, what we found was colleagues really liked the idea of this. Not as many signed up as I'd hoped, but the actual fact it was available seemed to go through really popular. And then finally, we introduced a podcast channel. And we did 9 Kickoff special podcasts, which offered a really deep dive into particular topics. And we weren't expecting colleagues to listen to all 9 podcasts. We were expecting them to listen to the ones that resonated with them or were connected with their job. And we asked kind of normal, everyday colleagues, a lot of them are grads or apprentices, to be the hosts of these podcasts. So we really pitched them at a level where we were asking sometimes quite silly questions, but we wanted to make them as accessible as possible and make the leaders really think about the answers they were giving. This is particularly important in a tech company when some of our engineers, frankly, talk a completely different language to the rest of us. And then we ask our commercial teams to go and sell products. And we have to bridge that gap between the two communities of people. We also had a bit of fun. So in our offices, we had smoothie bikes, inspirational speakers, choirs, dancing, lots of volunteering opportunities, and an opportunity to win, I forgot, one of these Sage-branded bikes. Went down really well. If you engaged with content, you had a possibility of winning a bike. It was as simple as that. We were trying to drive engagement. We filmed lots of it. We had masterclasses. And on top of that, we then have our regional functional kickoffs. So the individual teams in different countries also hold events to say what's important to them. Before everything happened, it's worth saying we also had our executive team at an offsite. And we briefed them on every single key message and what was going to happen. We drilled them in what they needed to say. And I went old school and I gave them a handy takeaway guide, which was glossy and they could all put in their bags. So they stayed on track with what the key messages were, but also what some of the difficult conversations might be around changes, transformation. So they had those messages. And all of it was surrounded by a creative wrapper. So green, as you may have noticed, is the colour of Sage. For 3 years now, I've been buying lots more green clothes. It happens, can't help it. But we had this creative wrapper that really went around everything and made it very clear it was our FY24 kickoffs. And it worked. So lots and lots of numbers. Overall, we had an ESAT target of 80. We got to 86%. We saw a massive rise in positive reactions. Our podcast was a huge success with an ESAT of 94. Ability for colleagues to meet our executive leaders. You can see 68% said they appreciated the opportunity. And 74% of colleagues agreed strongly that Kickoffs had supported their understanding of the business priorities and strategy. And that's the one I really care about, because actually we know, and lots of research tells you, if your colleagues understand the strategy and the business priorities, it will have a direct impact on your bottom line. That's what a load of our job is trying to do all the time, is make sure people understand what they're trying to do so they can drive forward for you. More stats, lots of internal engagement on our social channels. And what colleagues do is they take loads of selfies and then they post them on our internal chat. And it's brilliant to see, it's quite fun. I think some of the likes are probably just me going down and liking every post in an over-enthusiastic fashion. But it's great to see it go round the world, because we start in Australia and then you end in San Jose, and you see throughout the day, on day one, that travel around the world and that green and that enthusiasm, and it is lovely to see. And as you can see, the data just kept on coming. And this is important because we measured everything we could. And some of it was pretty scrappy. I'm going to be really honest about that. But we wanted to give ourselves feedback. We wanted to see what things were working, what wasn't working, and benchmark ourselves so we could get better and keep improving. Even if the numbers themselves and the data sources weren't holistically perfect, they were giving us something to build and work on. So we could get better as a team, and we know that Kickoffs is going to happen again next year. So what could we do? What could we improve? What could we drive forward? And we create a legacy. So not only did we win lots and lots of awards, but we started to see our leaders walking the floors, talking to colleagues, having roundtables, because that big push that we'd made them do for Kickoffs, actually, they saw it worked. They had engaged colleagues. It wasn't that hard, really, to talk to people. And we also then built on it for FY25. So that was back in October. We won't be entering again this year, Andrew. I think my team, as wonderful it was to win the awards, got slightly embarrassed and mortified. But I can tell you the numbers got better. So this year, if you can believe it, our ESAC got even higher. So much so, I made our team go back and question the data about 3 times because I didn't believe that we could actually get any better, but we did. Because we keep learning and we keep improving and we keep looking at the data and seeing how we can drive it forward. Planning is now starting for our FY26 kickoffs, which will happen in October. I've got to come up with a whole heap of new ideas, so please come and talk to me if you've got any. But thank you very much.
Fantastic, thank you, Shoshana. Have we got any questions from the audience? I've got a question. I sat in on a couple of the judging sessions where you slightly answered with that last question, but I sat in on a couple of the judging sessions, and I think what really impressed the judges were the results. It was so much stronger than most submissions we see, not just in the ICE Awards, but across all of our awards programs. Actually, you really focused on that. It was amazing results, and you're now saying that the results are kind of coming up even higher for 25. And I'm just wondering, having set that high expectation bar on the results, on the metrics, for future years, for this year, are those expectations now coming from senior management, or is it you that's driving the results? They've seen those incredible results. Are they now pushing for more, or is it your department that's pushing for more?
So Chris, if my team is in the audience, he would probably say, it's definitely me. There is definitely an awful lot of, I want to keep getting better because I think we can. But I also think we've raised the expectations around the quality of internal communications at Sage. There's just a general expectation that we're going to do a good job and it's going to be a certain quality, which is great. Is great. So it's when we drop below that we've set it up for ourselves. What it does mean is we have to force ourselves to be creative, which is really hard in the day job and finding time to do it. And you do have to keep doing that and driving it forward, often with less money as well. It's worth saying that we stayed flat for those 2 years, but we had come down in budget. We are doing it pretty tight and having to do a lot of it in-house All the podcasts, for example, are all in-house. They're all our team doing it themselves. So it's pretty lean that we managed to make it work.
Okay, fantastic. And a nightmare, I'm just going to say that, because I know that some of our sponsors will put one of our sponsors producing podcasts. So much harder than it. Any further questions? Yeah. If you can say who you are, which organisation you're with, and then ask them.
So my name's Anne Kerr. I'm with Travelport, also a tech company. I think October, doing a kickoff next year is amazing. I wish I could get my leadership team ready to plan for the next year as soon as October. How difficult is that, keeping the content that actually will happen, I suppose, for the year ahead? So
October and kickoffs is very much in the kind of psyche of Sage. I'd quite like to get rid of it. But it's very much in the kind of what they do. So that bit isn't hard. There's an expectation it's coming around. Yeah. I've got the dates in the diary. I've got next year's dates penciled in. The content is the tough part. I can roughly tell by the summer where we're heading in terms of messaging. I'm lucky we're in a place where the actual messaging doesn't evolve hugely at the moment. We're in that kind of cycle. But it is a pretty tight turnaround on the script that gets a bit hairy a week out because we'll record it in September. It's pre-recorded. We'll record it in September. Our CEO will come back from a lovely month on holiday in August. All my European team won't be there in August. So September is manic. But we keep it really tight and we've got the system going. But it's this will be my 4th one coming up this October. And as I say, we've started planning already, so I can go in probably April time to ELT and tell them what I'm going to do.
Fantastic. I think we've got time for one more question. Are you going to be hanging around in the coffee break?
Yes, I'll be here to the coffee break.
Fantastic. So if you suddenly think of a question that you need to ask, then Shoshana will be here. If you can say again who you are, which organisation you're with, and then ask away.
Hi, I'm Torgol from Expedia Group. You talked about obviously having to brief the exec team to do things very differently. So I'm interested to hear, how did that go with them and what was the biggest challenge that you experienced along the way?
So it's worth saying, the legacy of having done it a few years, I've talked, my exec team now have a level of confidence. We're not going to make fools of them and we are trying to set them up for success. I have learnt if I give it to them on a platter, they are more likely to deliver it how I want it. Hence why they got shiny printed guides with all the messages in that they could take away and write on. And I've done the same, I did the same this year and I'll keep doing the same again. Because if I give it to them like that, they are far more likely to execute and do it as they like. What I would also say about them is that they also like engaging with colleagues. They forget every year and you get this kind of huff as if to say, oh, she's going to make you walk around with a tea trolley and hand out socks. I did do that to our CEO this year. I have Sage socks. But actually, every time they do it, they then come off the back and go, oh, that was really fun. I got a tidbit, or they told me this was happening, and so it's just reminding them of that constantly, that they don't get many opportunities to engage with colleagues. They quite often are in rooms not talking to them. And every time they do, it works and it proves dividends. And then I do come back to the data with them. That an engaged colleague base that understands the strategy will deliver your commercial outcomes. And tech company, data-driven, that does tend to convince them going back to that point, which is one of the reasons we heavily index on the data. Because a bunch of tech guys who are only thinking numbers, it's the one thing I can report them back to.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Shoshana.